Kevin Bocek, Chief Innovation Officer with Venafi. Thanks for joining us on MySecurityTV.
Chris, it's great to be here.
And look, welcome to Sydney. We're here on the Impact Cyberark's Cybersecurity Day.
Yes.
I'll mention the hotel, Four Seasons, but we're just overlooking Circular Quay. So it's great to have you in Australia once again.
It's great to be back. You know, we were talking, it's been 10 years since we've been talking with each other. So it's good to be back here with you.
Wonderful. And Venafi is now a Cyberark company. We're literally off the back of the acquisition. 1st of October was the official acquisition day, and we're really going to be talking about identity management, and the Cyberark and Venafi acquisition and coming together creates a very interesting story in terms of cybersecurity on the identity of the human side, the users, but then also what Venafi brings to the table is almost a multiplier effect and identifying machines.
Yes.
So maybe just talk us through the acquisition, how this impacts on both companies.
Yes.
And you've obviously been with Venafi for some time, so it must be an exciting rejuvenation for you.
Yes. So in both, CyberArk and Venafi, we have something in common, which is we are both identity security companies. We protect the identities of our customers. CyberArk, of course, been well known for protecting the IT, the workforce, and now also developer identities. Venafi had focused on the area of machine identity. It's something that we recognized along with our customers, especially here in Australia and New Zealand, going back 8 years ago, is that there are really two actors on networks, on cloud, on the internet. There are humans and there are machines. And just like every human must have an identity, machines also must have an identity. And of course, machines are their workloads, and then there are devices. So when we think about workloads, it's all those cloud instances, it's a Kubernetes cluster, it's also those virtual machines, it's the load balancers inside our data centers. And then when we think about devices, it's the OT, IoT devices now that are all making up all parts of our business. And of course, whether it's a workload, whether it's a device, it must have an identity. Of course, they've been exploding. Our research shows that there's at least 45 times more machine identities than humans out there, and our customers out in their clouds, on their enterprise networks.
I think that's where the business case comes from identity management on machines. The explosion of IoT, the operational technology side. I take it, one of the questions I had in my mind was, why didn't Venafi buy Cyberark? I think that was my point, because I think the business case on the machine side is much larger. Sort of where did that fit, do you think? And how are you going to meld these two? You're going to stick with Venafi for a while.
Yes.
But eventually, I think, and CyberArk's very well known in the industry too, so you both have a key brand.
Of course. So this is something I think that I definitely CISOs, identity security professionals, have really been waking up to, the breadth and depth of the machine identity challenge. Yeah. Of course, back even 10 years ago, we talked about some of the early indicators of this. So you remember we would have variety of outages. So things like TLS certificates would expire. Yeah. Networks would go down, ATM networks would go down. We've even seen baggage handling systems go down just because a simple certificate would expire. That, of course, meant that we didn't have observability on it. We didn't have anyone that had ownership of it. We didn't have any type of automation. So these are all types of challenges that we've been facing. And especially as we've gone now, as we've all been adopting more and more cloud services, those number of machines growing. We can't keep track of them on a spreadsheet the way that we used to keep track of traditional IT assets.
Yep.
Wow, in the virtualized world, in the containerized world, no human can keep up. And so that's meant a whole explosion. Really all different types of machine identity. We think a lot about TLS certificates. Those are the ones that we use to connect to our web browser. We have machines talking with machines, but it's also, for example, code signing. When we install a container and we run that, even when we download an app to a mobile device, how does a mobile device know what's good or bad, friend or foe? That comes from a code signing certificate. That's a machine identity.
So most of this is coming from the automation. That's the business case now, right? In terms of the automation and tracking where these devices are and what they're doing and what their status is?
Right. So there's so many of them. First and foremost,
Yep.
can we bring an operational efficiency problem? Can we just make sure that they don't expire, that they're not being placed in error, that they're going to stop business? And then we think about automating for efficiency. That's a whole larger set of the business case, because one of the things that's been going on is the lifetime of machine identities been going down and down and down, decreasing. For example, Apple now has proposed that every web browser, not just Safari, but Chrome, Edge, over the next few years will have to have certificates that go down to just 10 days in lifetime. So we know what it is for all of our human users in the workforce to have passwords that expire every 30, 60, 90. So just imagine thousands, tens of thousands of machines now that need to have their certificates replaced. Wow, that could be 10, 20 times a year. So the only way that we can keep up with that is automation. It's actually taking us, people like me who would create lots of errors, driving that automation, creating that efficiency. That's a big, big part of the business.
That's obviously going to add a lot of security to it. I think the other question is a CISO perspective. How are they going to sort of reach out to Cyberark and Venafi? What's the rollout process, I suppose?
Right,
So how do we use you?
So the great thing is obviously already here in Australia and New Zealand, we've had a great set of customers. And now with Cyberark, we're just expanding that. Both Cyberark has a larger team here in Australia and New Zealand, a larger set of channel partners that are already working with a broad set of businesses. So reach out, engage with your channel partners. You're probably also already a Cyberark customer, maybe on the privileged access side, on the workforce side, all ready to get you started and get you started with Venafi.
That's the other part, the integration between identity access management and sort of IAM or PAM as well, the other one. What's the crossover? Is it going to look the same? It will eventually on a single, what they call the single pane of glass. You'll be able to manage all of this together. How does the two play, or will you have machines and humans in terms of process and technology?
First thing is, let's think about the problems, the type of both the problems the customers face and also where the adversary is trying to target. So a great example of the intersection between human and machines, for example, is in the workforce. So me as a member of the workforce, I authenticate to my laptop. My laptop, then a machine, connects to VPN. It connects to a network. It has to authenticate. So I, of course, authenticate with username, password, multi-factor authentication. But now my laptop is using a certificate to log onto the network, make sure now that I'm trusted, my device is connected on the network. That's, for example, where PKI comes right into play in delivering those digital certificates down the device. That is one intersection around human and machine, certainly that we're going to be helping customers with it at Cyberark. As well, when we think about that intersection of developers and machines. So developers, they create infrastructure. Infrastructure builds machines. Another great place where that intersection of developers authenticate. Now then, developers, infrastructures of code build machines. Each one must have an identity. Another great intersection around human identity and machine identity. And of course, we have to think about the adversary. They're looking to, for example, masquerade on the network, steal one of those identities. We've seen that, especially the need for secrets management, so that we can safely protect all of those different machine identities. That might be an API key, might be a JOC token, it might be a TLS certificate, so they can't steal them. So all this intersection that we're going to be working on more and more with Cyberark, and that's one thing that Gartner now too has been given advice to clients globally, is around having a control plane for machine identity, bringing the idea of secrets management, PKI, certificate lifecycle management together, integrated, and that's something that we're going to be working more and more, especially the advice that Gartner is giving here to clients in Australia and New Zealand.
It does create sort of multiple layers, right? From the user to the machine to the application that they're actually using. Even if some credentials get out, the system should understand, hang on, that's not quite right, the behaviour's wrong, or that machine's being used in the wrong way. And we're seeing sort of Chinese researchers are starting to crack RSA codes and the like. How does this change? One of the key points with talking to people like you who travel the world, the threat landscape and what you're seeing around the world.
So that is a really important point, especially in the critical infrastructure here in Australia and New Zealand, is post-quantum readiness. We've been working 30, 40 plus years with the same set of capabilities, the cryptography that underline all of our digital identities. Whether you're using an access token, a machine authenticating to another machine, the TLS certificates, they all depend on cryptography. And yes, we're seeing now that RSA does look like it will be broken. Might not even take a quantum computer to do so, but quantum computers are coming. And so there's a whole next generation of new algorithms which we're going to have to get in place, the new identities. The thing is, it's up to us as application security vendors to roll out systems now that are compatible. You then have to roll out the identities. And that's something that we're going to be helping customers with. And it's really a generational change. It's not like Y2K where there's like a date. This is going to be a challenge all of us have been dealing with already, started to, and over for the next 10, 15 years, this generational change that post-quantum is going to bring, and the threats that we're going to start to see with nation states. And then, of course, that will trickle down to the general off-the-street
the next
attacker.
weakest link.
Yep.
Maybe you were here at Impact here in Sydney, as we mentioned at the outset. What are you hearing from your customers now? Sort of the general market response to this is great, because it's that convergence of vendors too. We hear from CISOs of they don't want to be dealing with too many vendors, and it sounds like now that they can put two together and solve a lot of their problems.
So, talking with CISOs, talking with others, they've been solving the network security problem, the endpoint security problem. Underlying everything, that foundation is identity security. And that's what we're hearing a lot, and excitement here at Impact is about identity security that Cyberark is bringing. Solving the workforce, the IT, the developer identity, and now especially expanding out the machine identity security capabilities all together on one platform. And that's one of the things we're really excited about at Venafi joining Cyberark, is now we can bring all these integrated capabilities together to help customers. So loads of excitement around that, loads of excitement around starting to solve these problems. Again, whether it's like a certificate outage that's been pestering, creating challenges for teams, whether that's something like an API key or access token that's been on a GitLab repo or on an S3 bucket that's been exposed, all of those things now we can help customers now together with Cyberark.
The other aspect is the machine side of things and the operational technology aspect, IoT and the like. Is that, again, as an innovation officer, you're looking forward? How far out do you look? And we're running an event tomorrow on robotics in terms of the explosion of what we anticipate to be in robots. Movable machines, basically. Is that within the business case as well? Because that operational technology becomes a public safety issue, slightly different from the IT challenge, but the OT challenge, it must be an immense opportunity for companies like Cyberark and Venafi.
It is a significant risk, of course, challenge, and of course we are helping customers solve that. You think about it, devices, robots, engines, sensors are going to be out there in the world for 10, 20, 30 years. Again, we talked 10 years ago, we thought about the threats that we're facing then. Imagine the threats that we're going to be facing 30 years now to the future. And core to that, though, really, really important no matter what, will be identity. It's going to be identifying those devices, so the hardware. They're running more and more software, actually many pieces of software, so the identity of how those devices authenticate to the network, the identity of the cloud. Of course, any type of device we put out there, it's now talking to the cloud. Of course, that's something that an adversary wants to be able to do, is to look like the trusted cloud. So that's a real risk that we're worried about. We thought about ransomware, where the adversary takes over one device. Where area we're worried about is the ransom that comes from the cloud, when they take over a cloud, and now then they have a whole fleet of devices at their will, whether they want to brick those devices or whether they want to create chaos, disruption. all sorts of risks that we're concerned about. At the foundation, though, it's all about identity.
Yep.
Again, how do they authenticate those devices? How do they, again, we work with a lot of airlines. So, an A350, an A380, a Boeing 787, they're just big mobile devices. You actually install code. So how does that type of big mobile device know what code is good or bad, friend or foe? It's all driven based on identity. So yeah, that's a problem today, 10, 20, 30 years that we're going to be dealing with.
It's one of those other ones that companies still, or enterprise still grapple with it because of the numbers. What's the approach that's generally taken? There's a bit of automation in identifying the devices and the like, but then drawing it back, I think it's almost mind-blowing in terms of once you're talking about identity in the numbers game. The general rollout, most of it's automated, or it's a phase-in project?
So yeah, it boggles the mind. I mean,
Yes.
we as humans can't, really fathom. If we think about machines like in the cloud, they're changing every 10, 20, 30 seconds. So their lifetimes are limited versus then too, we're talking about systems that are going out in the field, live for 30 years. So it's a vast difference. And Chris, it starts with, first of all, just like as with anything, okay, what do we need to secure? It's about that first level of observability, because once we know what we need to protect, then then we can triage what are the risks. We can then start to protect those identities, get controls. This also very much too involves us as humans, because developers, platform teams, operation teams, we are responsible, we're accountable for the machines. Machines don't yet just control and rule themselves. So we're accountable and responsible for them. So yes, getting observability, getting ownership of people, and then getting automation so that we can take, us at least out of the picture in terms of where we create errors. So if we think about things like issuing, installing TLS certificates, if we think about giving developers access to code signing certificates, taking, again, people out of it, because that's where both errors can occur, but also the adversary can come in because they can trip us up, they can steal, they can try and get, again, that's what they would love, to be able to issue an identity that's trusted so that they can live on the network. It starts with that observability, monitoring, and then getting automation.
Well, I can see why identity access has become quite a skilled area within cybersecurity. It's one of those areas that people tend to either specialise in or certainly do it for a while before moving on. It's a fundamental principle of cybersecurity. Kevin Bocek, Chief Innovation Officer with Venafi, now with Cyberark. Thank you so much for joining us on MySecurityTV. Enjoy the rest of your time here in Sydney, and we'll have a walk around Cyberark's Impact Day and all your customers here today.
Yes, it's great to be here. Thanks again, Chris.